Morning mist hung heavy over Maple Street in the Boston suburbs. Among the neat houses enclosed by white picket fences, Maggie Thompson was busy tending to her garden. The scent of soil and dew-dampened grass melted into the peaceful morning air. Old maple trees cast gentle dappled shadows on the ground. Mrs. Thompson. Good morning. Looking up at the cheerful voices of neighborhood children, she saw elementary school students waving as they waited for the school bus. Their Maplewood Elementary School uniforms, navy blazers with red ties, gleamed brightly in the morning sun. Good morning, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Maggie responded with a warm smile. Setting down her pruning shears by the rose bushes, she waved back at the children. After 32 years as a local elementary school teacher, she was deeply trusted by the community. On weekends, after worship at First Baptist Church of Newton, volunteering at the church's Sunday school had become another cherished part of her routine. Even in retirement, her warm personality remained unchanged. As she resumed tending to her roses, Maggie's thoughts drifted to the upcoming weekend dinner with her family. Since losing her husband George to illness 3 years ago, time spent with her only son Brian and his family had become her greatest comfort. Their Sunday dinners were an unwavering tradition, and lately, they often gathered after her grandson Lucas's baseball games. Brian had become one of the most successful entrepreneurs in town. Showing programming talent since high school, he studied at MIT and made his mark developing security software. 20 years ago, after the bitter experience of his father's company being taken over, he started his own business. His company had now grown to employ over 200 people. Brian, with his calm and collected nature, was a family man who especially cherished time with his son Lucas. Though busy on weekdays, he never missed Lucas's weekend baseball games, watching his son's growth with intense focus. However, lately, he had been coming home later from work. Maggie worriedly observed him spending long hours secluded in his study. Brian's wife Ashley worked as chief stylist at Eternal, an upscale boutique on Newbury Street. Well respected in the fashion industry, she was a regular stylist at Boston Fashion Week. Since meeting Brian at Boston College, she had been a devoted wife and mother, supporting their family. Tall and stylish Ashley would cook elaborate meals for her family on holidays. Sunday roast, in particular, was precious family time. However, recently, things had changed dramatically, and an invisible crack had begun forming between the couple. What concerned Maggie most was the change in her grandson Lucas. A first grader at Maplewood Elementary and the ace pitcher for the local Little League at age 6, he combined his father's intellectual curiosity with his mother's bright, energetic personality. A passionate Boston Red Sox fan, he often told Maggie about his dream of pitching at Fenway Park. "Grandma, I struck out 3 batters again." But lately, Lucas's smile had begun to cloud over. Though showing strong attachment to his mother Ashley, he had started crying at night, and his teacher reported that he seemed listless at school. 2 weeks ago, on Sunday, the backyard barbecue had been a lively gathering celebrating Lucas's baseball team's championship. Pleasant autumn sunshine streamed down, the grill wafted savory aromas, and children's excited voices echoed throughout the yard. "Dad, watch this." Lucas's white ball cut through the blue sky. "That's amazing. You're definitely our ace." As Brian lifted his son, Ashley joined them for a family photo. "Mom, let's throw some more." "Well, but first, let's eat some hamburgers." Watching their natural smiles, Maggie savored the happiness. The table was laden with apple pie brought by neighbors and salads from church friends. It was an afternoon that radiated community warmth. Munching on the hamburgers Ashley had carefully prepared, Lucas enthusiastically discussed baseball with his father. Ashley smiled gently beside them. They believed this simple happiness would last forever. Now that scene feels like a distant memory. The barbecue's aroma that had filled the garden, the children's laughter, it all seemed to have faded like an old photograph in an album. As Maggie put away her pruning shears, she reflected on the recent changes in her family. She had no way of knowing that this peaceful morning scene was about to change dramatically. "I can't stay together anymore." Ashley had spoken those words just a week ago. It happened when they accidentally met in the Whole Foods Market parking lot. Ashley, who normally appeared impeccably coordinated, wore minimal makeup that day, with dark circles under her eyes. "I'm involved with investor James Crawford." Ashley's tearful confession seemed somehow unnatural. As she spoke about her relationship with James, whom she'd met at the boutique Eternal, her eyes were vacant, refusing to explain clear reasons. She held a new luxury brand bag, but her fingers trembled slightly. "But why? You loved Brian, didn't you?" "I don't really understand either. It's just..." In Ashley's expression as she trailed off, Maggie sensed something left unsaid. "What about Lucas?" At that question, Ashley's face twisted momentarily. "Lucas. I'll take him. James agrees." After that conversation, Ashley hurriedly got into her car and drove away. Her profile in the rearview mirror seemed to glisten with tears. Brian's reaction was even more unnatural. Learning of his wife's infidelity and request for divorce, he maintained an eerily calm demeanor. Showing neither anger nor sadness, her son simply suggested, "Let's resolve this through discussion." Instead, he spent more time secluded in his study, absorbed in late-night phone calls and computer work. Maggie, getting up for water in the kitchen, often noticed his study light still on past 2 a.m. "Brian, are you all right?" "Yes, Mom. Don't worry. Everything will work out." Those words were filled with certainty, but carried an unsettling shadow. The low male voice on the other end of phone calls. Her son hurriedly closing doors. The expression hiding something behind his intense gaze at the computer screen. The impact was definitely reaching Lucas. "Mom's acting strange." These words from her grandson, sitting in her lap after school, pierced Maggie's heart. He had become less enthusiastic about baseball practice. Strange how? "I don't know, but there's always a scary person behind Mom." "A scary person?" "Yes, someone in black clothes. When Mom talks to them, She looks like she's going to cry. Lucas began crying more frequently at night. His screams for Ashley would echo through the house in the dead of night. Though Brian would rush to comfort him, the crying grew increasingly intense. Maggie's maternal instinct told her something was seriously wrong. Her son's unnatural calmness. Ashley's sudden personality change. The unsettling atmosphere in their home. And above all, Lucas's anxious demeanor. Particularly concerning was Brian's behavior in his study. The phone calls lasting into the night. The complex numbers scrolling across his computer screen. And the name, Crawford, that occasionally surfaced. The investor Ashley had mentioned. Each time that name was spoken, Maggie noticed Brian's expression momentarily harden. With her years of experience watching children as a teacher, she had a keen eye for detecting family crises. However, this time, she still couldn't fully grasp what was happening within her own family. That weekend, after worship at First Baptist Church of Newton, Maggie offered a prayer. For her family's safety and happiness. But that prayer would be tested just a few days later. Events began moving rapidly in an unexpected direction. Tuesday morning, October 29th. At 8:15 a.m. Maggie was heading to her son's house to deliver Lucas's baseball glove he had forgotten at school yesterday. The maple trees, beginning to turn red, painted the street in vibrant colors. However, on this particular day, the scenery felt oddly ominous. Confirming the recent unsettling situation was also one reason driving her feet forward. As she approached her son's house, she was struck by a sensation of the air growing heavier. Usually at this time, neighborhood housewives would be enjoying their morning walks. However, an unnatural stillness hung over the street. The white two-story house came into view. She remembered the study light had been on until late last night. This morning, all windows were dark, curtains still drawn. As she walked toward the entrance, her sense of unease grew stronger. The front yard, usually meticulously maintained, showed signs of being trampled. The welcome mat was slightly askew. She pressed the doorbell, but there was no response. Another press yielded the same silence. Brian? Ashley? As she called out and reached for the doorknob, she found it unlocked. In that moment, a chill ran down her spine. Her son's house was never, ever left unlocked. Brian, abnormally neurotic about security, would never make such a basic mistake. Opening the door, warm stale air seeped out from inside. Multiple footprints in the entryway. Shoes usually neatly arranged were scattered about. Is anyone here? Her voice was absorbed into the silent house. A faint sound from the living room. The sense of someone sitting in a chair. Lucas? Brian? She advanced cautiously. The soft carpet absorbed her footsteps. The kitchen on the right showed no signs of use. No breakfast preparations had been made. Another sound came from the living room on the left. Then, a trembling "Grandma" struck Maggie's heart directly. The moment she stepped into the living room, the scene before her eyes took her breath away. Lucas tied to a dining chair. His wrists were loosely, clumsily bound. As if whoever did it had no real intention of hurting a child. Light bruising on his cheek. More like an injury from careless haste than any violent intent. Lucas. As Maggie rushed over, her grandson's body trembled slightly. His eyes were wet with tears, no trace of his usual bright expression. His school uniform was wrinkled, showing he hadn't changed since yesterday. Mom. Mom left me. Lucas continued in a shaking voice. She said Dad was dangerous, help. Those words drained the blood from Maggie's face. Hurriedly pulling out her smartphone, she dialed Brian's number. The number you are trying to reach is currently out of service. Then Ashley's number. Out of service. Without hesitation, she dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? I came to my son's house and found my grandson tied to a chair. What's the address? 42 Maple Street, Newton. All the while, Lucas's trembling wouldn't stop. Maggie explained the situation while keeping one hand on her grandson's shoulder. Please don't leave the scene until police arrive. Understood. Hanging up, Maggie tried to maintain her composure while untying Lucas's bonds. Lucas, can you tell me slowly what happened? What's going on? While gently questioning him, she checked his condition. Fortunately, there were no serious injuries. However, his small body still wouldn't stop shaking. And Maggie didn't yet know that this was just the beginning of a long nightmare. As they waited for the police to arrive, Lucas slowly began to tell fragments of the morning's events. His still trembling voice. Words breaking off occasionally. His small hands tightly gripping Maggie's sweater. Dad got up really early this morning. Lucas began speaking slowly, eyes downcast. He said, I have important work today. But something was wrong. Wrong how? Dad's face was so stiff. He didn't smile like usual mornings. And then, right after that, Mom came with a man I didn't know. Lucas's voice grew smaller. He was with the scary person in black. Voices heard from the upstairs study. We need to find the documents. We have to stop Brian. Fragments of urgent conversation. Then Mom came to me. Lucas's voice trembled. She said, I'm sorry, while crying. And then Ashley gently sat her son in the chair, then slowly but surely tied him up. Her trembling hands at that moment. Eyes wet with tears. And the words whispered in his ear. Don't move. It'll be over soon. Police sirens approached from the distance. Maggie sprang into action. First, checking the house's security. Examining all windows and doors. Any signs of suspicious entry? Was the back garden exit locked? She called the neighbors. Mrs. Wilson, did you notice any suspicious people or cars? Early this morning, there was an unfamiliar black SUV. Then she provided detailed information to the police. Family composition. Recent changes. Ashley's alleged affair. Changes in Brian's behavior. Lucas's testimony. However, the decisive discovery was in the study. With police permission, Maggie went upstairs and gasped. Scattered documents. Ransacked drawers. The computer screen still on, displaying complex rows of numbers. Among the papers strewn across the floor, an old newspaper article caught her eye. Dated 20 years ago. Local IT company collapses due to fraudulent trading, Crawford Investments suspected of involvement. Beside it, documents with recent dates. Evidence of James Crawford Jr.'s investment fraud. Traces of client asset misappropriation. Overseas account transaction records. And a note from Ashley. A string of numbers and letters like a code. Only the last line was clearly readable. October 29, 10 a.m., Federal Prosecutor's Office. Maggie's hands shook. All the dots were rapidly connecting. While police searched the house, Lucas gradually began to calm down. However, anxiety still lingered in his small eyes. "Grandma, are Dad and Mom okay?" Maggie couldn't immediately answer that question. Because she too was beginning to understand the true danger of this situation. After the police investigators left and Lucas was temporarily placed with the Wilson family next door, Maggie returned to her son's study. From the mountain of scattered documents, the truth from 20 years ago began to emerge. It started with the collapse of Brian's father, Maggie's husband George's software company. In the late 1990s, Thomson Software Solutions was one of the most promising startups in the Boston area. It had achieved steady growth in security software development. However, in 2003, the company suddenly fell into crisis. An old newspaper article captured that moment. Thomson Software Solutions collapses after hostile takeover by Crawford Investment, 350 employees lose jobs. James Crawford Sr.'s aggressive takeover. Behind it lay deliberate stock price manipulation and leaked insider information. However, in the trial at the time, Crawford was found not guilty due to lack of decisive evidence. "You can't prove anything." Crawford Sr.'s arrogant words recorded in the trial transcript. 3 months later, George passed away from the strain. Brian was an MIT student at the time. The collapse of his father's company. The hardship of the employees. His family's grief. The son who silently watched it all might have been preparing since then. And now, James Crawford Sr.'s son, James Jr., was committing investment fraud using the same methods as his father. The documents lined up detailed evidence. Illegal diversion of client assets. Creating fictitious investment projects to collect massive funds from wealthy individuals. Money laundering through overseas accounts. All of this was evidence Brian had gathered over 2 years. Ashley's sudden change was connected to this too. James Jr. appearing at her boutique. At first, just as a customer. However, he already knew about Ashley's existence. "Your husband is trying to destroy my father." Threats from Crawford Jr. words implying harm to her family. And the fabricated affair story. Ashley had no choice but to comply with Crawford's demands, unaware of her husband's plan. However, as she gradually began to realize the truth, she secretly started cooperating with Brian. And this morning, Brian was scheduled to testify at the federal prosecutor's office to submit decisive evidence linking the 20-year-old case with the current investment fraud. Crawford's men were moving to prevent that. Ashley, sensing the danger, had chosen to tie up Lucas to protect him. The loose binding was intentional. To keep her son in a secure place while deceiving Crawford's men's eyes. All the points now connected. But problems remained. Where was Brian now? Was Ashley safe? And Crawford? Maggie's smartphone rang. A call from an unknown number. At that moment, a new development was about to begin. Mrs. Thompson, this is Sarah Martinson from the Boston Federal Prosecutor's Office. The voice on the other end was calm and reassuring. Your son is currently under FBI protection. His testimony was completed successfully. Maggie's tension gradually eased. Mrs. Ashley is also protected. Her information greatly contributed to the operation's success. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Carefully opening the door, 2 FBI agents stood there. Mrs. Thompson, we're here to escort you to your son and daughter-in-law. Lucas came running from the Wilson house. Grandma. Where's Dad and Mom? And then, 2 figures appeared behind him. Lucas. Ashley rushed over, hugging her son tightly. The tears wouldn't stop. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Brian also hurried over, embracing his family. It's okay now. It's all over. At the same time, Boston media were reporting breaking news. Crawford Investment CEO arrested, large-scale investment fraud uncovered. Illegal activity in 20-year-old corporate takeover, investigation reopened with new evidence. Whistleblower reveals $1 billion in fraud. Still embracing his family, Brian began to explain. I've been preparing for 2 years. While gathering evidence of Crawford Jr.'s investment fraud, I was also trying to uncover the truth about Dad's company. But why didn't you tell us? To Ashley's question, Brian smiled gently. I didn't want to put you in danger. But in the end, I needed your help. Ashley squeezed her husband's hand. When James threatened me then, but when I found your documents, I understood everything. Your acting was perfect. Yes. But I feel so sorry for Lucas. Lucas held both his parents' hands tightly. The scary people won't come anymore. No, everything's okay now. 1 month later, on Sunday, Maggie's backyard was once again filled with family. The aroma of barbecue melted into the autumn air. Lucas played catch with his father using a new glove. Ashley, as always, was preparing her specialty dishes. And Brian was showing a genuinely soft smile for the first time in a long while. Looking at George's memorial photo, Maggie whispered, "You must be happy too." As the sun began to set, maple leaves gleamed golden. Their nearly lost daily life had returned in tangible form. Family bonds that had grown stronger through trials. It was something precious that could withstand any storm. Watching her happily smiling family, Maggie made a vow in her heart to continue protecting these precious bonds, now and always.